If you're somebody who spends a lot of time sitting at a desk, particularly for work, and you deal with hip pain, back pain, neck pain, pain in your shoulder blades, and you're simply stiff from sitting sedentary at a desk for long periods of time, then you should probably watch the rest of this video. So when we're sitting at a desk for long periods of time, the reason people run into issues is because they're sitting in this idle position of 90 degrees of hip flexion along with spine flexion. But it's important to know that you can be doing drills at your desk that will allow for you to explore more range of motion than you would otherwise if you just sit here in an idling position. So starting with our hips, when we're looking to expose our body to more positions than we would when we're simply just sitting in a chair, the number one thing we should be addressing is internal rotation of the hip. Internal rotation of the hip is simply looking at the femur relative to the torso is rotating inward. We're gonna put our hand on our knee and bring our knee inward as we extend our spine and anteriorly tilt our pelvis. So as I drive the knee inward, I am extending my spine and I should feel almost like a deep bone stretching. That is the hip capsule stretching. Internal rotation is the deepest portion of our hip, meaning all subsequent functions of the hip depend on it and are scaffolded off internal rotation, which makes it one of the most important. So when we're doing this, again, we're extending our spine and anteriorly tilting our pelvis. I'm grabbing my knee and I'm pulling it into internal rotation. Once I find that deep bone stretching, we generally want to hold that for 2 minutes in an effort to just expose our body to positions that you otherwise wouldn't be getting. To contrast that, we want to be stretching external rotation as well, which is a little bit more common and more often seen in day-to-day life. When we're doing external rotation, we want to see the same spine extension in the anteriorly tilted pelvis. From here, we want to use our hip to drive our knee down. Yes, you can use your hand to push you a little bit further, but I definitely would want you to use your hip to do that motion first and see where you can get to and hold that position. And so to contrast internal rotation, all we are doing is externally rotating, trying to drive our knee down. We should now feel the outer hip and glute lengthening, which should feel different than internal rotation. And we'd want to do this on both sides so that both hips can get attention. And one hip may be different than the other, and that's worth acknowledging for your other training. And so again, we have the extended spine, the anteriorly tilted pelvis. We're driving the knee down in an effort to feel the outer backside hip lengthening to again expose our body, expose our hips to a position that you would otherwise unlikely see when you're sitting at a desk for long periods of time. The other thing we can stretch when we're sitting in a chair is simple hip flexion, straight leg hip flexion. Hip flexion is also paired with having tight hamstrings. And so for this, what we're gonna do is have our knee relatively straight. We want to extend the spine and anteriorly tilt the pelvis, just like we did for the other drills. From here, I want to begin leaning over with my spine extended. As I lean over, you're going to feel the lower glute, upper hamstring beginning to stretch. If you lean over so far that you begin rounding at the spine, then you are exceeding your range of motion that you can do for hip flexion. So you need to reset, regain that positioning, and have a little bit more integrity to the stretch that we're looking to achieve. And so again, all I am doing is extending my spine and leaning over until I feel the maximal stretch on the glute and the hamstring. So after stretching the hips, we're moving to the spine. When we're sitting at a desk, we'll often see people in this kyphotic position where they're in spine flexion. That's not inherently bad. What's bad is not being able to get out of spine flexion and losing the ability to segment our spine. So we could be doing seated segmentation at our desk so that we can again expose our spine to positions and movement options that we otherwise aren't exposing ourselves to. So if we're sitting at our desk, what we'd be looking to do is fully extend our spine and then fully flex our spine. And so we could do this a couple different ways. Generally, I like hugging myself so that I can get as deep into flexion as I can. And then from the bottom, I'm gonna extend my lower spine and anteriorly tilt my pelvis and begin working my way up one by one from the bottom of my spine all the way up into the thoracic and the cervical. I can do the reverse and begin pushing my lower back into flexion where I'm tightening my core, and then I'm rounding my low back into the mid back, and then I'm going into thoracic spine all the way into the cervical spine. And again, I am extending my lumbar spine, working my way up into thoracic, all the way up into the cervical spine. We can add degrees of rotation where we are now exposing ourselves to spine flexion while in rotation. And so again, all we're looking to do is expose our body to positions that we're otherwise not exposing it to. It's really that simple. And so again, we can rotate the other direction to contrast it. I'm going to keep my hips completely still. I'm rotating my torso as far as I can, one way or the other, but we should be doing both. And then from here, I'm going to round my back to create flexion while I'm rotated. And then I'm going to extend my spine to create extension while rotated. We go the other direction again. We create spine flexion, feeling the abdomen contract to get myself into flexion. And then we're going to extend as we're rotated. We can go back to the neutral position, begin spine flexion at the lumbar spine, work our way into thoracic, all the way into cervical, and reverse back up. And so again, all we're looking to do is move our spine segmentally because we have 24 individual vertebrae in our back. And the worst part about sitting in a desk isn't sitting in the kyphotic position, it's the inability to get out of the kyphotic position. And again, our spine does quite a bit. It does extension, it does flexion, it does rotation, and it does lateral flexion. Another thing we can do besides seated segmentation are controlled articular rotation, spine cars, C-A-R-S. And doing a spine car would be exploring all of the movement options that are within the spine. And so we start with spine extension. We rotate without moving the hips. We begin lateral flexion as we pour water out of our ear, and then we move into flexion, leaning forward. As I lean forward, I'm rounding my spine as much as I can. I begin rotating, and then I pour water out of my ear to laterally flex again. And then I extend my spine as if it's one big circle. And the entire time I'm not moving my hips and pelvis because I'm trying to create as much independent movement from my spinal cord as I can. And so again, we can hug ourselves, find full extension. We're going to fully rotate, laterally flex, water out of the ear, round the spine all the way back around into rotation, lateral flexion, and then extension. And so again, pairing that with seated segmentation, especially in the lumbar spine, where the lumbar spine is fully flexed and then the lumbar spine is fully extended, is a really good way for us to expose our spine to other positions that are there so that we're not sitting idling in this kyphotic position for too long. So this is something that we should do periodically throughout the day so that we're just exposing our body to other positions, because if we don't use it, you lose it. And this is a big reason why most people lose the ability to move their spine intentionally. So after doing the hips and after doing the spine, we're looking at the neck and the shoulder blades. And just like we did for the spine, we can do controlled articular rotations to explore the range of motion both our neck and our scapula have so that we're not sitting in this idling position for so long. And so for the cervical spine, similar to the rest of the spine, we're going to be exploring full extension, full rotation, full lateral flexion, full flexion, all the way down into rotation, lateral flexion, all the way up into extension. And so without moving my shoulders or my shoulder blades, I am simply just exploring whatever degrees of extension, rotation, lateral flexion, and flexion are there to again expose our body to positions that we otherwise would not get to if we're sitting at a desk idling for extended periods of time. To contrast the neck car, the cervical spine car, we could do the same thing with our scapula, our shoulder blades. Our shoulder blades are meant to glide in 4 main positions: elevation, retraction, depression, protraction, and elevation. And so all we are doing here is moving our shoulder blades through its full range of motion to again reduce stiffness, provide synovial fluid, and use it so that we don't lose it when we're sitting idling for long periods of time. And so we can do it with our arms by our sides as well. It doesn't really matter, you're just exploring the full range of motion of the shoulder blade. Full elevation, full protraction, full depression, full retraction, all the way up and reverse. And so just like with the spine car, we can take the shoulder blades through their full range of motion. We can take the cervical spine through its full range of motion, through again, extension, rotation, lateral flexion, flexion, rotation, and all the way around. And so again, if we're sitting at a desk for long periods of time, because so many people do for their jobs and their extracurricular activities if they're doing stuff on the computer, bad posture is posture you can't get out of. And sitting in this kyphotic flex position that we often see isn't the problem. It's the prolonged periods of it that's the problem, and the inability to get out of this position. So again, some ways we can work on this is stretching our hips. We talked about stretching internal rotation of the hip, the deep capsule stretch that you get, which is the most important because all of the subsequent functions of the hip rely on it. We also stretch external rotation of the hip, where we're creating length on the outer glute so that we can expose ourselves to more positions of the hip that we, again, otherwise wouldn't get into. We explored hip flexion, where we're lengthening the hamstring in the lower glute so that we're extending the spine and finding as much of a stretch as we can there. We talked about doing spine extension and spine flexion, where we're doing seated segmentation, where we're looking to articulate each of the vertebrae independently. We talked about doing this while in rotation, where we're doing extension and flexion while in rotation. We talked about doing spine cars, where we're in full extension, we're doing rotation, lateral flexion, flexion, and all the way around to, again, expose ourselves to positions that we otherwise would not be getting into. We should be doing this periodically throughout the day so that we're not maintaining an idle position for too long. And to finish off with that, we did the cervical spine, where we're doing neck cars, moving the neck independently of the torso and the shoulders. And we also did the scapula, where we're moving the shoulder blade through its four corners of protraction, elevation, depression, and retraction. So again, if you sit at a desk for long periods of time, you should be moving your body periodically to maintain the health of your joints. And if you don't use it, you lose it. And most people aren't doing this stuff, hence why their body is getting a whole lot worse over time and not better. Thank you so much for watching the Bodybuilding Not Bodybreaking YouTube channel. If you found it helpful, drop a comment, like, subscribe, share it with a friend or family. That stuff really helps us in expanding our reach to popularizing this training approach, because we know there just isn't a better way to do things. If you have interest in diving deeper into the stuff you just watched, feel free to join our school community. On our school community, we have a lot of additional content. We have an exercise library that has over 200 different movement options. We have programs. We have additional videos that are concepts, lectures, and rants to give you guys a deeper understanding as to how and why we do things. We also have a discussion board where you can get direct access to coaching feedback from me personally. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok for additional updates for when we post new content. Thank you again for watching, and we hope it was of use to you.